it just helps me learn more about myself, but also about the world. And I never want to stop learning. Like, I think that to me feels like what maybe death is, right? It's just like this not learning or the stagnation. So I think I'm always like going to be learning. And the way my philosophy on life or creativity or anything is just like, I think we're all students and teachers in the same breath.
And welcome back to another episode of Art-Based Sessions. Today, our special guest is Rayos. How's it going, man?
Good, man. I'm excited to be here and chat with you on a more intimate, one-on-one level. Yeah. Because I know whenever we see each other, it's always like in community and different events with a lot going on. And I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm super glad that you made it by. And yeah, we're going to try out something different today. Like, you're probably going to be the first guest that's actively going to try to draw and chat. And I think we'll see how that goes. Okay. There's always a first time for everything, right? So
for sure.
But yeah, man, how you been? How are things going lately?
Good. Yeah, just trying to stay busy. I think I'm always just looking for opportunities or even just supporting other artists and friends. Like yesterday, I went to a few events that, friends were either an art show or putting on like a pop-up.
Oh, nice.
In San Jose. So kind of just trying to, do the rounds of that. And meanwhile, try to juggle being a full-time artist and, keeping on top of the business side, the artistic creating side. So it's a juggle. Like,
Yeah, that's always the trick too. And like, I was going to ask you that later on, like if you were doing things full time or if you were doing like something on the side, but we can definitely get into that later. I think that's always kind of the hard part of just figuring out like, how do you do it? Like, and everyone's at different stages, right? Some people are doing full-time jobs and they get to do this as their hobby on the side or vice versa. So it's kind of interesting talking to folks and seeing like how they balance things no matter what the situation is. Yeah,
it's definitely a balancing act for sure.
Awesome. Usually we start off the podcast by asking folks like, if you don't mind giving us kind of like a quick background of like in general your art career and just how you kind of got started with everything in the creative field.
I've been, this is a question I always reflect on and, I'm frequently asked, I think in different, contexts, but I pretty much have been doing art my whole life, like since a kid. And probably would say more professionally, like the past 5 years.
Okay.
Grew up doing a lot of art, drawing, probably even took a break from like actively doing visual art, like in, middle school, did some other creative things. High school got into graffiti art, and then college started getting back into like drawing and stuff. That's kind of the gist or the general kind of trajectory of my creative arts practice.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's cool. That's kind of cool where we all start at different stages. And then I think I was the same way too. When we were kids, we would just kind of doodle and stuff like that. And then you start seeing like, oh, I'm kind of like the last one that's still doodling as like I'm getting older and everything. So then you start figuring out like, oh, this is my thing, I guess. And then compared to everyone else that starts spinning off into different careers. And then you kind of start saying like, oh no, this is actually what I enjoy doing. And you just don't realize that.
Yeah. So, I actually, oftentimes people are like, oh, did you study art? And I actually didn't. So that's also, I'm sure we'll jump more into that. But yeah, my background, undergrad and graduate is in actually psychology. So that's pretty much what I had been doing like the past 10 years in terms of like career. I really enjoy teaching and doing different things. But yeah, like probably been doing art full time now, like the past 2 years. So
nice.
Yeah.
How was that? Like, how was your experience at school? Like what was kind of like your day to day when you were actively in school?
So I'm sure like a lot of folks out there, like, and I kind of hear this too when I work with youth or younger folks. They don't really know what they want to do. Like, I don't know if anybody does, you know. I think we kind of just fall into something that we enjoy, or maybe something that we think is going to be prosperous in the future. But yeah, like, I think once I got out of high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do.
Right.
At the time, I was really into graffiti. So like that was important, like graffiti and like hanging out with friends and doing that kind of thing. But of course, like coming from a working class background, my parents were like, you should go to college, even though they hadn't. So it was like, you know, me going to college was like a very experimental time. You know, took all these different, you know, hodgepodge of classes, you know, general ed stuff. Took like one art class. And originally, because I was really into graffiti, I thought I was going to be going into like graphic design. But didn't take any classes other than in high school, like some digital media stuff where I work on my graffiti skills. But yeah, like I took, I think, one art class at De Anza College, and it was just too much like the critique part. Art. So that kind of turned me off. Like, you know, I had some decent skills, so it wasn't like I was getting like super critiqued harshly. But I think just as a sensitive person, like witnessing like the teacher kind of just, you know, tearing a new one on other students, it was just too much for me. I was like, ooh, I don't like this. It doesn't feel okay to me. Like I think creating, and I still have that sort of philosophy that creating should be, you know, as a form of self-expression, and it should be fun. Like it should be, you know, personal. And sometimes when we put it out there, just naturally, I think people are going to critique it. So that's like another thing, like sometimes that could be, you know, could turn folks off. But yeah, you know, got into psychology like that. Also like did journalism for a little bit and transferred to SF State in undergrad to do journalism. My first semester of journalism, I didn't like it. I took a bunch of journalism classes. And again, I was very much so introverted at that point in my life, early 20s. And I actually had to talk to people like strangers, in San Francisco at like, you know, a particular neighborhood that was like my beat. And I was like, I don't like this either. You know, jumped into psychology, full steam, did that. Was really into like, you know, social psychology research, and I worked in like research labs, which is really interesting too. Meanwhile, I was still like drawing, doing art. I worked at like the student store and would like draw on receipts. And like, so that's how I started to kind of build up the practice again. Right. Always sketching, of course. My last year at SF State, I took a year's worth of just art classes because I had finished all my psych courses. So I had just electives, which is fun. You know, I took like figure drawing, figure painting, mixed media. I think I might have taken a printmaking class or something. But that's kind of where I got a little more refined skill. And then after that, just kind of was on my own for a few years, just making art and putting in cafes and stuff in San Francisco. Nothing too big. And then graduate school, I studied expressive arts therapy. So, you know, there was a big influence of using creativity for healing, which again is, you know, one of my interests and passions. So it was like a perfect alignment, perfect connection of like psychology and art. So did that, you know, and since then had been working with various populations, youth, families, adults, and and I'm still kind of working in that way, I guess, in the community. Like I was just mentioning earlier that I recently taught a workshop out in the community with adults and youth coming by and just kind of engaging. And so I really like that aspect of art too.
I think that's always it. That's the part about like when you do something that you work with people one-on-one and you also work with people in groups, that there's a different dynamic there too. And I can only imagine with that when you're either doing that with students or if you're doing that one-on-one with people in psychology, that there's like a different way of expressing yourself and also getting information from people at that point.
For sure.
What would you say when you were doing that? what was that? What was those aspects like? How you were mentioning with just kind of being with the symbolism and like healing and psychology part of it. Like how did you start integrating that with not only your work, but when you are talking with students or the community? Like how do you start integrating those aspects?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think I'm really fascinated by the theme of archetypes. Carl Jung was very big on archetypes, or this idea of patterns or symbols that he kind of had encountered just in his experiences of traveling the world and different philosophies and looking at different art all over the world, and just seeing a lot of similarities or patterns and things. So that always sparked my interest too, like, going to museums or even like just learning about, different cultures. My current body of work really focuses on symbolism. But I think it always has been fascinated by just the patterns and things you see in different cultures. So I think when I work with folks, either one-on-one or like in a big group, oftentimes the first hurdle is like getting folks to actually create or make work. Like oftentimes there's this, like, I feel like a lot of folks have this imposter syndrome, or like art, I'm not an artist, or I can't draw a stick figure. Yeah. So I think, as a way to kind of calm them down, right? It's like, okay, like I'm going to walk you off the ledge. Like, like we're all creative. You don't have to be an artist. Like, art is pretty broad and expansive. So let's kind of erase or sort of decolonize this idea of what art is or isn't. Right. And so one of the questions that I've been asking people, and actually this came up the other day when I was teaching a workshop, the person's like, I don't know what to draw or what to do. I was like, okay, like, how about you think of yourself as a symbol? Like, what would that be?
Interesting.
Right. Because then it's like, okay, now we're speaking in metaphor. Now we're speaking in sort of symbolic language. And so it's a lot easier to put something down on paper versus like, when there's a blank canvas, it's like scary. So I think that really helps folks just kind of like, hone in, like, okay, like, what do I associate myself with? Is it peace? Maybe I'm doing a peace symbol, or, peace hands, peace sign. Maybe I have a big heart, so I'm drawing a heart and things coming out of it. I don't know. That's kind of like how I guess, approach art, working with people. And I think also with myself, sometimes I'm not entirely sure what I want to draw, but as I kind of evolve with my practice, I think I start to build upon past things that I've done or past things that I've seen. I'm always kind of researching and learning about stuff. Again, really interested in pre-Hispanic art and symbolism, and recently picked up a book where you're like, it's kind of like a linguist book, because it helps break down the symbols in like what their actual meaning is and language, and it's quite fascinating. But I think that's kind of where I'm at in terms of working with people and working with myself. In terms of the arts.
That's amazing. And like how you were just saying, even that exercise alone feels that, you're doing the symbolism part right there, where you're just trying to either invoke an emotion within them or just for them to figure out like what's inside of them too. And I think that's really amazing. I've never heard of that one before. And I think that's a pretty cool one that just not only opens them up, but also just like they can start just going, like how you said, doing whatever that they feel like at that point.
Yeah, I think I like inviting folks to create, whereas I think that for one of those experiences, or just experiences I had growing up in the arts, where again, like it felt like you were going to be critiqued if it wasn't perfect or correct proportions or whatever. So I think that that's where a lot of people get turned off by the arts. And I think art has, always been a part of sort of our ancestry or just human evolution. Again, we spoke through symbols and we recorded histories in that way. Also just storytelling too. Like I love telling stories, like, and I think also, that's also a part of like our history too. Is, it's a way of, just keep like learning wisdom through the arts, through stories, through different things. And I think that's what the arts is still about, like, and helps people. Like, and I always ask people, are you an artist or art appreciator?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like 50-50. Some people are like, oh, like I wouldn't consider myself an artist, but I do such and such.
Yeah.
Or no, I'm more of an appreciator. And then so that kind of determines where the conversation will go. Right. It's like, I don't know, like if they're art appreciator, what kind of art do you like? If they're a creative person, what are you creator? Like, you know, these are kind of the conversations I enjoy having with people.
The thing that we wanted to do throughout the season is just kind of talk to people about their experience, both in the kind of art gallery scene, but also their vending experience, just kind of get more of those perspectives, just because people are always fascinated by it. And also there's a lot of folks who want to kind of get into that space too, and they just don't have information on how to do that. So that's been like the goal that I've been trying to bring with folks, because I know yourself and everyone else that I've been talking to throughout the season have either one or the other or both of that experience. Do you remember when I know you mentioned it, but do you know roughly when you started getting your work into some of these gallery shows, or just having them out there in general?
Yeah. So I think I had mentioned a little bit earlier about like just living in San Francisco and like going to art shows. So I think that's one, right? Going to other art shows, supporting other artists, talking to people. I think that networking aspect really helps you just kind of take a pulse of the scene or the vibe that's happening out there.
Right.
And yeah, nowadays, right, looking up artists or following on Instagram, you know, certain artists or event pages or things, pop-ups that are happening in your area. I think that's always really key. So again, I think familiarizing yourself with the context in which you live, right? The creative scene, going out to the events, meeting people, talking to galleries, you know, asking them if they have open art calls, you know, in the year, which most do, some don't, depending. And I think you'll start to get a feel, right, for, you know, who you connect with, who you don't, who you're not sure about. So I think that's one way to kind of start building. I think for me, you know, showing at cafes, little things here and there. And I've always worked in series, so I get really inspired by an idea or a thought, and I just kind of run with it. Like, you know, so I think always having a body of work ready to show, whether it's, you know, a few paintings or drawings or whatever, to like, you know, even more than that. So like having something to show, you know, whether it's a portfolio or your Instagram page. I think in San Francisco too, because other art friends that were coming up with me too, we formed an art collective there in San Francisco, the San Pancho Art Collective. Oh, nice. And some of those friends went on to create Incline Gallery in the Mission. Oh, okay. And it's been around, I think, maybe 10 years now.
Oh, nice.
So I think sort of through my friends, through the networks that I had built in undergrad, in that sort of last year of taking art classes, being connected with all those people and kind of what they were doing and their projects. And again, some of them were already kind of moving along sort of the gallery scene and doing things. So again, I think for me, I've always been a natural observer, taking notes. These friends were starting a gallery. So I think some of the first places I had shown was their gallery, Incline Gallery. And throughout the years, I had shown in different group shows and things with them. So that was kind of a start. And then I think, probably, like I said, the last 5 years that I've been back in the Bay Area, just applying to different art calls, being on different websites. Like there's one called Call for Entry. It's Call for Art something like that. Cafe is the acronym. And if you go online, it's basically like this list of different art calls sort of nationally. So I really highly recommend folks, like create a login, get in on that. That shows you sort of all of these art calls, some of which are free to apply, others where you have to pay. And that's where it kind of varies.
Yeah.
A lot of the art calls, I'd say half and half probably, are free. Other ones you have to submit, a fee, anything from like $15 to like $45, which can be costly. So again, like don't go broke applying to all these things, like budget your money. And if you're not at that point to, apply to these, apply to the free ones, or in your local area, again, go to the galleries, like I was mentioning, talk to them, ask about how to show work, and usually most galleries will tell you like, send us a portfolio or your website or things like this. So I think that's really key and important. I probably have to get better at that. Just approaching galleries. I think for me, it's like I end up just kind of either talking to folks, networking that way. Like I'm really good at in person versus just online. And then just applying to stuff.
Yeah.
I think actually just yesterday, I think I posted online, like this past week, I received like 3 rejections.
Yeah.
So, I'm used to it after doing it, these past few years, like applying to these calls and stuff, but it still stings a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
Rejection.
It kind of goes back to the critiquing that you were saying earlier, just like having that. It's a different way of when you put yourself out there and then other people can kind of judge your work, that it's still, whether it's positive or negative, it still gets at you.
Yeah, for sure. So, but at the same time, I think, and another friend pointed this out, like, which is kind of cool. Like a lot of people responded like, oh, like, it's okay. Like keep going. Or like, I'm glad you're sharing that. Because I think that most people don't see that behind the scenes sort of aspect of art. Like, Instagram or social media kind of shows us like everything is all like, great and amazing. But I think, there's also like, again, like in order to be successful, I think you have to just continue to apply yourself, and sure, there'll be roadblocks, or, you may be rejected or critiqued, or you may feel like, oh, I failed. But, I think just keep applying. And then at the same, this past week, like I also got accepted to 3 other things. So it's like this balancing act. Again, like I had mentioned earlier, it's like a juggling, it's like, okay, like I'm going to apply to these things. Okay. But actually now I have to make stuff. So it's like, I want to apply, but then I also have to make stuff. And then I also have to figure out like, okay, like how am I going to pay my art studio rent and my regular rent and all these things. So it's often a negotiation with your time and your energy. And it's definitely a learning curve, and I'm still learning. So
I think that's always the good thing, is that if you are still learning, that's always a good thing, because if you feel complacent or just feel like you can just keep doing the same thing over and over, then I don't think you're challenging yourself at that point. So
and I really like challenging myself. So
for that, do you, like, for example, when you are trying to submit to new places, do you have to always create new artwork, or can you bring something from like your backlog or anything like that?
That is a great question. You definitely can use stuff you've already shown before, or that you have created. I think oftentimes, the art calls or the galleries, wherever, they'll say maybe work that you've made in the past 3 to 5 years or something. So not like something that you made in high school or something, right? Like, unless you just graduated high school, I don't know. But, so I think that's, most will state like specifics like that. And sometimes I think the challenge or the negotiation for me is like, well, I just applied to like these 5 different things, and I have like a certain body of work that maybe fit for each different call. Or like maybe I applied to 2 with the same body of work. So sometimes it's like, oh, like if they both get accepted and the art shows are at the same time, like how is that going to work? Right. So sometimes I have to be really mindful and like, okay, like strategic, like about like, okay, like I'm going to submit this work because they're asking for printmaking work, right? I sort of identify as like a mixed media artist because I do a lot of different things, and then I also mix or multidisciplinary. So if it's like a printmaking call, like I'll submit all of my printmaking stuff. If it's a painting call, then I'll submit all of my painting stuff. Yeah. Or if it's general, it doesn't say what it specifically has to be, I'll submit maybe a combination of different things.
Our online store is almost ready to launch. Here are some of the items that will be available. We've also collaborated with local artists on some unique designs. Be sure to follow our social media pages for the latest updates.
Cool. The other thing that we were trying to do throughout the season too is kind of bring up the guest's artwork as well, and just kind of it doesn't necessarily have to be this art piece. We can talk about it, but we can also talk about in general, like your process when you create any artwork and stuff like that. But yeah, I remember getting this print a couple of months ago, and it's just, I don't know what it was that it just, from all the other ones, they were amazing as well. But this one, like anything, like something stands out to you. And for me, this piece really, like, going back to the symbols that we were just talking about earlier in the conversation, like I think that's probably the aspect that got to me too, of like just having the perspective of like people thinking about things, but just the way that you also did the symmetry of this piece, where it's like you let this be the focus, but when you actually look at it a little bit more close up, because from a distance you may not even see these symbols just because so like from a distance. But I think that's the aspect of like when you see something bold, but then you can kind of see more of the behind the scenes kind of thing here. So, you from this point, like, feel free to talk about either the process or the meaning behind this piece, or in general, like the artwork that you do.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you chose this one too, because I think, because I do so many different things, I think a lot of people don't realize. Would it help if you use this? I don't think people know that I'm also like a figurative painter, because I do a lot of like symbolism stuff, like the sketch that I'm doing now. So I think that, when people see my stuff, and this is always a question too, like I was just, asked this question yesterday too, what kind of art do you make? So it's always like, I think that's like a standard question that people ask, right? Especially when you say I'm an artist, right? Like, if I was a, musician, well, what kind of music do you make? Right. It's so hard because I'm into so many different types of art or interests. But this whole series actually started about when I first moved into my art studio. So how I found out about my art studio actually was because I worked just up the block, like literally on the same block, but the opposite street. Also used to be an old cannery, but it's a mental health clinic. So I worked at the mental health clinic, and I had known about the Citadel is the name of the art space there, the warehouse. But I never actually had gone there, living outside of San Jose for like 12 years, San Francisco and then Mexico. And then I moved back to San Jose. I was kind of having to start from scratch, like, network and things. But this whole series of large portrait paintings, they're probably about 3 by 4 feet. I don't know in inches off the bat right now what that is. But this was the first time that I was able to go really big, because again, prior to that, I had only gone small because of working, in, tight quarters. This whole series was about sort of the thought process. And, again, like, I know when I'm thinking, like, I'm somewhere else, right? So I think I really wanted to capture sort of the thought process and how people see the world through symbols and kind of like these kind of thought bubbles, in a way. So that's kind of what this whole series was about. it was like just the inner world, like seeing the inner world of somebody's thought process. So it was like, I think I want to say I made, like I create in series. So I think I made maybe 16 of these paintings, these portrait paintings. Some were just random models that I found online, like imagery or like people that I had sketched in real life.
Yeah.
And then some were just my family members.
Yeah.
Like, it's quite hilarious because, like, you know, I think a big part of arts practice is just like always sketching. And I have like years worth of sketchbooks where my dad and my family members show up, but he's kind of the figure that shows up the most in my sketchbooks. And he's always like, why do you draw me? And you're just a really good model.
Yeah.
So they actually made it into those paintings too.
Nice.
And, you know, my dad, the painting I did of my dad, he's really into barbecue, music, and, you know, beer. And like, so it was like all these symbols of like, you know, a barbecue grill, music symbols, and like beer, you know?
Yeah.
And so this one actually, because I had a solo show there at the Citadel, we have a gallery space.
Oh, okay.
So I had a solo show there, and it was supposed to be another, like a duo show, like another artist, but they couldn't do it. So I ended up like wanting to add a little bit more. And so this was the last piece to sort of finish off the series. And so I showed it just all on the same wall together, and it was all interacting. So it was really quite cool to see. It almost felt like a graphic novel or a comic book in a way. Like these people were communicating and they're just creating this whole world almost.
Yeah.
And so this one, I think I entitled like The Meditator or something, because, you know, on and off, I've been, you know, into meditation from moving to San Francisco, living there for a long time, practicing Buddhism and things like that.
Yeah.
So really got into like meditation. And so this one is really like just meant to be peaceful and has like these different symbols. They're actually Native American symbols related to like peace and wisdom and healing. Like the hand and this sort of diamond shape. It's like wisdom.
Yeah.
So these different like symbols just kind of reflecting that inner peace or inner stillness. I think you and I are talking about too off screen is just like, you know, as you get older, you kind of enjoy like the quiet moments, you know? And I think that's what I really wanted to capture in this imagery. And I really like the color textures, the color palettes. I'm a pretty quick painter, so that's why I think painting just comes naturally to me. And as I've kind of like bridged out of painting, like, you know, collage, printmaking, textiles even. So it's like similar concepts or approaches to art like I would a painting, but now instead of paint, I'm using paper, colored paper for collage. Or if I'm doing just a black and white carving, lino cut, like how do I maybe get this light and dark, like shadows, like through crosshatches or certain, you know, cuts. So I think the approach is similar because a lot of my work is really bold and graphic. But it's just like a different approach, right? A different medium. So, like if I showed somebody this work, my printmaking work, my textile or collage work, it's like 4 different artists created it, you know?
Yeah.
So
that's the part I was going to actually ask you because I've seen, so many different mediums that you've done. And I think that's the coolest part is that a lot of other artists stick to one style or the style that they're known for, but not to, you know, I mean, I think it's cool because even though that you have different mediums, like the one that you did for the One Culture show, that one was totally different as well. But in a way, I still can recognize your style at that point. And I think that's really cool. And that I don't see a lot of artists do that. They're able to translate their style into different mediums. So I definitely applaud you for that part.
Thank you.
I think that's really cool. But I think creatively that also lets you try out, like what you were saying, of try out different things and seeing like what works and everything.
Yeah, I think for me, the reason why I create is because it helps me kind of like process life and all the things that are happening around me, and just because I think as people we naturally absorb this sonic world, energetic world we live in, right? Like even just thinking of traffic right now, I need to say that word and like people's body tenses up, right? Because we've all experienced it, like honking, like frustration, right? So I think with art, like it really helps me like take all of those things that we just kind of hold that I can't necessarily put words to and just get it out. So I think that I'm always creating because it just helps me like get it out. But it also helps me communicate. It also helps me tell a story. Sometimes art, doesn't have to have a deep meaning. And sometimes it, for me, it does. Like it kind of varies on the context. Like I think a recent show I was in, which you might have seen, was it was a Flamin' Hot Cheetos themed show. And so I just pretty much sewed felt into fabric, creating like a hot Cheetos bag and Chester Cheetah on it, which is a very complicated piece because it was multi-layered.
Yeah.
But that one wasn't deep. It was just hot Cheetos.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, so again, like anything from like, something really fun like that to something more profound and deep, such as this. But yeah, essentially like, I think creating, I'm as I continue, it just helps me learn more about myself, but also about the world. And I never want to stop learning. Like, I think that to me feels like what maybe death is, right? It's just like this not learning or the stagnation. So I think I'm always like going to be learning. And the way my philosophy on life or creativity or anything is just like, I think we're all students and teachers in the same breath. So like, you're teaching me something, I'm teaching you something. We're both learning. We're both having an experience. So I think that's how I approach, art creating. And sometimes like behind the scenes, like I'm frustrated. Like, I like, especially if I'm doing printmaking, like I'm making a lot of botched prints or like ruining or wasting paper. And I'm just like pulling out my hair, or like the printing press doesn't work. Or, if I'm painting something, like I'm not getting the right color that I used yesterday or whatever. Right. So it's like really working stuff out. And I think the more I just practice, like, again, it becomes more fine tuned, right? Like just the more we do something right, the better we get at it. And sometimes it doesn't come out the way you want. And so I think I've come to the point where sometimes you have to just accept it. Like, okay, the piece is here, leave it. Like, because there used to be times where I would overdo something or maybe I would not know how to approach it. And so then now I have a bunch of unfinished paintings for years. And some of those still sit in my studio, right? I have a lot of older work that is just there. And it's like stuff I'm not really making anymore. But it's interesting, right? Because it's like I think now I'm kind of building a symbolic language. I know where I'm going with the work I'm doing, and it's evolving. And so I think that's why when you say like, oh, like I can recognize your work. That's great. Like it's, meaning that like, I think I'm hitting the mark if I continue to build this language and that people can kind of understand it, or even, just be curious about it, ask questions. Like that's what I guess excites me about art too, is I always want to hear people's interpretation of the art before I tell them.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think it's all valid and it's actually sometimes like I learn like when people tell me, oh, this is what I was thinking about it. Like, oh, wow. Like I didn't see it that way. Or like you're on the mark. Like that's actually where I was going or what I was trying to express or communicate. So I think that's why symbolism is really something I'm fascinated about, and I continue to sort of put into my work.
Right. Yeah. An example that was at the same One Culture show. when I got there, or I think we got there at the same time.
Yeah.
Just looking at all the pieces, they were amazing. And then when some of the artists were actually talking about the meaning behind it afterwards, it's exactly what you just said, of like, I interpreted it this way before they explained it. And then when they explained it, it made it even better, because then now you understand the context and like the meaning behind the artwork itself. So yeah, totally agree with you on that aspect of just like appreciating it for what it is. And then when you get more context behind it, it just amplifies it even more at that point.
Yeah. I think, again, I think that's why art is really important and crucial for us. It's just, it provides us different perspectives on this thing we call life, right? Like we're all in the same, sort of, trying to think this metaphorically. We're all in the same network, but on different channels or different, right? And so sometimes you find those people that you match up with, or, you know, resonate with, or really like have a lot in common. And other times you're like speaking different languages altogether, which is also cool too, right? Like, 'cause again, I think there's so many different perspectives, so many things happening in the world. Like we can't all agree. And I think that's, you know, it's harder to be friends with somebody that's completely opposite with you. But it's kind of interesting. Like, I feel like I have such a diverse variety of friends that are into different things, not just art. Right. Actually, I like that too. And I like learning from those folks that, you know, don't think in the way that, you know, I do, or, you know, see things. So yeah, it helps me, I think, as an artist as well.
This is I guess it used to not be the hard question, but more and more I've noticed that people have been having a harder time answering this question. But for you, has there been some of your projects that you feel like have been your favorites, like throughout everything? And that could be either, you know, a collaborative effort, or it could just be something that you worked on by yourself. So if you could narrow it down, like, could you do that, or is that too hard to do? Like,
no, I have a few, and I was reflecting on this this morning before coming, because again, I think, like I have some really a few that stick out. So I think I had already mentioned the Palo Alto project with the Palo Alto Public Art Program.
Yeah.
The beauty of that one was that it was really about community engagement and collaboration, right? Because you know, my project entitled Rituals of Resilience, you know, with a mental health background. And when I was working during the pandemic, I was really just fascinated in the rituals that people had to do to keep healthy and sane, right? Like, I mean, it felt like you were imprisoned almost. And in order to keep sane, you had to go for your daily walks or do your daily things. Like, you know, it became almost more ritualistic, more important, more highlighted. So I think with that project, and it being sort of one of the biggest, not only like budget, but also like where I had to engage other people, right? Because sometimes art can be a very solitary experience, right? Like it's me in the studio painting or creating, and not a lot of dialogue or influence or things happening. Whereas this one was like, okay, like the material that I need to create something is coming from this engagement. And so that was really influential in this whole project, where I had taught free workshops for like 4 months. Like would have like 10 people come to the studio. I would tell them about my project and the themes of the project. And so we would make art related to sort of rituals and how people, you know, were resilient during the pandemic. And then I also interviewed mental health therapists and service providers, specifically focused on the Latinx community, just kind of giving them a voice and highlighting sort of their experience during the pandemic. And the culmination of that was this sculpture. It's very symbolic and has the different symbols related to all the feedback that I got. So it was kind of a cool project because I got to engage with the community, and I also got to create something as a result of it that's now like 7 or 8 feet tall. It's like standing out in front of the city hall of Palo Alto.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So that's one project. Another one, when I did the artist residency in Mexico City, the Palo Alto project actually was kind of a continuation of this earlier project that I did in Mexico City, where I interviewed or I documented essential workers there that I just met. And I really only had a month to create this body of work.
Right.
And I would approach people, even like buying, art materials from the local art store or the paint store. I would ask those people like, hey, I'm doing this project. I have a short amount of time. I would show them my previous collage work that was very much, it almost looks like lucha libre masks almost, because it has just like the face, the, eyes and mouth, nose of people. And so I asked these folks, could I document you as being sort of an essential worker and being almost like a superhero in your community?
Yeah.
Right. Because I think a lot of times, folks that work in the service industry don't get recognized, and that was the idea of this project. I only had a month to create the work and then show it at the end of the month. And so I documented like 16 people. I don't know why 16 keeps coming up. That's kind of funny, but for a series, and so I created these, I think they were like probably I think they were maybe 3 by 4 feet paintings on raw canvas. And I got really experimental with it. I was creating multiple at once. So I'd take these folks' photos, I would remix it, like, cut out the eyes and the mouth and like almost make it kind of to hide their identity almost.
Right.
And I used a paint roller and like I was making these like large brush strokes, and then I would refine it with, oil pastel and graphite. And I really just mixed the media, and that project was really beautiful because the way I got the buy-in from these essential workers was like, hey, if you let me take your photo, at the end when I finish the final piece, I'm going to give you a copy of the piece. And so I was like, okay. So I think weeks had gone by and I would still see them because they were in the area where I was working out of.
Yeah.
And and then when I finished, I invited them to the show. Some came, so that was really cool. They got to see the original work and took photos with them in front of it.
Nice.
And then the ones that couldn't, I just showed up to their workplace and handed them the print. And then they were like, oh, wow. Like it was just such a beautiful like moment, like, just to see kind of like the joy in their eyes to like receive this and it's them, but like in a different way, like almost again portrayed as these kind of superheroes, but like it had like a very pre-Hispanic vibe, like Aztec, Mayan, like, vibe. And they were just, I think it like really like boosted them up and they felt seen, and so I think that project was just really heartfelt. And I actually want to turn it into a book. I haven't done that yet, but
that'd be great.
And I still go back pretty frequently to Mexico City. And so sometimes I'll run into those people or we follow each other on Instagram and things like that. Or I go to their cafe or wherever they worked and I still see them. And then lastly, I know.
Oh no!
Wrap it up. But the last collaborative project that I work on, this has already been the 3rd year. I think we've done this with my friend Steven Longoria. He's a artist friend originally from Texas, but he's here in the Bay. Him and I collaborate each year on a Day of the Dead altar on the east side of San Jose at the Mexican Heritage Plaza. And we've been creating these large altars, like sculptures out of cardboard. And this past year, we kind of went really big and we made boots. We made like a huge skull, like all kinds of stuff. And I think that project's really fun because the first time I did it, it was the pandemic. It was 2020. And because I'm such a 2D, illustrative painter, artist, everything, the way that they had created the altars for 2020 was outside. So it was actually a drive-through thing that people would see. So I was thinking, okay, well, I could just do paintings, but I want, people to really be able to see and have an experience of this altar. And I had no background in sculpture or making an installation. So I did the one thing that I kind of knew about, which was paper mache. So I bought these huge balloons and then made these large like skulls. And I had a month to do it. And I had my mom helping me. Like she was like, helping me with the paper mache. Yeah. And then I had like these 3 skulls and like limited time to paint them. So I involved Steven and then my partner to paint one.
Yeah.
And, so since that time, we've been making them each year, and like each year it's kind of gotten more grandiose and more intricate. And so this year I'm already thinking of like, okay, like now I want to make like a huge plushie or something. I don't know, just, so it's really exciting, like doing these kind of different projects, because it really does force you to think in a different way or approach the practice in a different way. So yeah, I hope to continue just expanding and doing different things like this in the community, and having shows and going to people's shows. And so if you see me out in the community, don't be afraid. Say hello. Most often times I have stickers. I'll be passing them out, or, so say hi.
Yeah. No, that's literally how we met, where I was just like, I know your work. And then as soon as I was looking at your piece, I was like, you were right there, like next to your piece. I was like, oh, there he is. Totally approachable.
Yeah. And I think in the past, like I didn't really ever put my face out there. It was just my art. And then I feel like the more I put my face out there, like people like recognize me, and or like I feel like I get more engagement when it's like versus just the art. So it's interesting, and I get it. Like, it's more personable, right? Like I think people can relate and connect. So don't be afraid. I'm friendly.
Well, congratulations on all those projects. So hopefully, you make the book, because I think that's an incredible story to tell, and I think so many people would be inspired by something like that. So
for sure,
I hope that happens. All right. Well, before we headed out, did you want to give any shout outs or plugs to any folks?
Shout out to you. Thank you for highlighting artists in the Bay, and really just creating a space that's comfortable and open to, talk about art, talk about, just larger things happening in the Bay Area. So thank you, first and foremost. Let's see. Things coming up for me. I'm in a few shows next month, one at Soft Times Gallery in SF. I have a piece in that. Really, I saw some of the work the other day. It looks amazing. So make sure you check it out.
Nice.
And then, I'm in another group show in Rock, Paper, Scissors Collective in Oakland, also next month. And then I'm going to be in a print show in El Paso, Texas. I probably won't be able to make it there, but it's kind of cool to have my art in other places.
Yeah.
And then Hayward in August. I'm going to be vending at Fernando's event, Art of the Bay event. So please come out and support.
Yes, we would all appreciate that one. But I'll definitely make sure to put all those links and everything, because all those hosts and events sound amazing. So that's the whole point, is just to spread the love.
And then this is the drawing.
There you go. See, we'll do a close up here, but look at this throughout the whole show. Yeah, our first in-person drawing as we're doing conversation. Yeah, and
expressive arts therapy, we would do these things called aesthetic responses. So it's like somebody would do or say something, and then, we would do our interpretation of that, or through a drawing or a movement or a thing. And so my aesthetic response to being on the podcast today was just this kind of holding this offering, of, a flower growing, and there's an ear, just, to be listening, sometimes to those growth moments, sometimes which aren't loud and noisy. It's just silence, So.
Tying it in selfishly for me, our collective was originally called Grow Canvas Grow. So there you go.
Sweet. That's cool. All right, man. Psychic. We on the same channel.
All right. Well, I really thank you so much. And I'll also post links to what do you have? Do you have a shop or Etsy?
Shop.
Make sure.
Yeah. RayosMagos.com.
There you go.
Rocking the t-shirt, the hat.
I'm rocking your buddy's shirt today.
Yeah.
But yeah, on previous episode, I definitely had your shirt on. And
yeah, the Sharky. That's right.
The Sharky.
All
All right.
right.
Well, we'll do a cheers here.
All right.
And thank you so much for taking the time. Whoa. Awesome. And thank you for tuning in to another episode. And we will see you next time. Take care.
Peace.
If you enjoyed the fun chat, don't forget to subscribe. Audio versions of the podcast are also available on all popular podcast platforms. Links available in the episode description. Thanks again for listening.